Paige Summerland is looking forward to spending the perfect Christmas with her fiancé, Jack. But the weather forces her to take a detour, where she's stuck with the annoying, but charming, Dylan Smith. It's a very busy time at the airport around Christmas, but Paige is excited to meet her fiancé in New York. She has reached on time and notices the Radiant Bride magazine. Another woman picks a copy, which interests her, so she clarifies that she writes for the magazine and has worked on the cover story about finding the perfect mate. She's living proof that her advice works, since she's traveling to meet her fiancé's family for the first time on Christmas. She thinks the woman might be overwhelmed about planning her wedding, so she pays for her copy of the magazine and asks her to take her advice seriously. The woman just pockets the money and keeps the magazine back. At the same airport, Maxine Harper seems stressed about her husband Frank not printing the boarding passes to save the environment. The bar manager there, Dylan Smith, thinks the drink is too stale and asks Aaron to make sure he makes something the customers love. Aaron asks him to hurry so he can catch the plane, but Dylan wants to wait. Aaron knows he's trying to avoid going home but points out that a broken heart is no reason to stay away for 4 years. While Maxine and Frank get their boarding passes, the airline agent asks Paige about her seat preferences. They only have window seats available, but she needs an aisle seat since she gets claustrophobic in long flights. This flight is already full and Dylan notices he has an aisle seat, so he tries to offer an exchange. But Paige agrees to adjust with it since she needs to take that flight itself. The agent also doesn't let her carry her vision board since it counts as extra baggage and carry-on, and suggests she can just stuff it in. She's offended since the board is about her perfect wedding, but decides to cooperate and checks in another bag. At Jack's place, his parents, Susan and Neil, are happy decorating the tree when he gets a call from Paige. He's excited about her meeting his parents and they discuss how much they need to plan for their wedding over the next 3 days. His mother has already started planning and she wants to give her input too. She realizes her seat is in the same row as Dylan's and mentions she's claustrophobic, which he already knows. He agrees to scoot in so she can get the aisle seat, and she hands him her magazine to hold while she tries to adjust her seat. He wonders who writes the silly stuff about finding a perfect mate, and feels bad when he learns she has written it. He still thinks it's good for her because many women believe in this stuff, which offends her even more. Frank texts their daughter Julie about their flight being on time, but Maxine wants him to ask her if they have dried figs. They have been married for 20 years, but he still doesn't know she puts dried figs in the Christmas dressing. Paige wonders if Dylan thinks what she writes doesn't matter, but he clarifies that he just doesn't believe in soulmates. She has done a lot of research for this article, but he doesn't think people are destined to be with a special someone, because they always leave. She believes in fate and gives an example of how she met Jack. She was on her way to the job interview for Radiant Bride when she ran into him in the elevator, and he knew exactly what to say to calm her down. Dylan jokes about that too, which irritates her, and she tries to ignore him for the rest of the journey. He still feels bad about upsetting her and knows he'll be more pleasant after the holidays. As Dylan returns to his seat after some time, he notices Paige sleeping and feels amused by it. The captain announces that a lot of airports are shut down because of the storm, which is why they're making an unexpected detour to Buffalo, Niagara. Paige starts panicking about getting late for her important brunch the next day, but it seems like a relief for Dylan and he's glad the storm could take hours or days to clear. Frank also seems clueless about why they're landing in Buffalo. Paige calls Jack to inform him about the detour and assures him she will figure something out. Maxine wonders when they can catch the next flight, since everything seems uncertain because of the snow. While Paige is still optimistic, Dylan shows them their flight has been canceled. They learn from the news that all airports north of Washington, D.C. have been shut down because of bad weather, and hundreds of flights have been canceled. It's December 23rd, and Paige can't stop talking about how supportive Jack is, with Maxine and Frank. She shows Frank his pictures and feels nervous about meeting his parents. She doesn't want to sound self-absorbed, but it's very important for her to make the wedding perfect. Their shuttle arrives and as Paige struggles to get her bags and vision board in, Dylan offers to help her. At the Buffalo Airport Hotel, Maxine and Frank opt for a room with a balcony. The hotel desk clerk informs Paige about their offers for an extended stay, but she's sure she doesn't want to stay there for long. She wants a room facing the airport so she can watch when the planes take off, but they only have an adjoining room like that. Paige is struggling to get reception on her phone when the person in the adjoining room starts blasting the news too loudly. She knocks on the door and finds Dylan, who turned up the volume so he could listen to it while he bathed. When she turns off his TV, he teases her about her soulmate. He has heard from the news that the storm could clear that night, which satisfies her a bit. He offers to let her use his phone to contact Jack, but she doesn't want to. He teases her about not wanting to call her fiancé from a strange guy's number she's sharing a room with, but she points out the huge door between them. She angrily leaves his room and asks him to lock it properly from his side. Susan discusses wedding venues, but the option feels weird to Jack. He thinks Paige wants something more special, so they consider the plaza, which is usually booked a year in advance. The wedding is in 6 months, and Jack wonders if they can have the reception at the house. But Neil knows Susan doesn't want random people touching things around the house. He suggests that they can wait for Paige to arrive to make the decisions. Jack hasn't heard from her, but knows she must be trying her best to get the next flight. Paige watches the news about things getting worse for travelers stuck in Buffalo. Maxine thinks they can take the bus, but Paige knows even transit is on strike. She asks them to join her and they officially introduce themselves properly. She learns that they're traveling to see their daughter and her husband for Christmas. While Frank is excited, Maxine doesn't usually like traveling outside California. Paige thinks the snow and cold air make Christmas more special, but Maxine rants about the traffic jams and runny nose. Paige is still excited to share that Jack's parents have a huge house in the Hamptons where they celebrate the holiday, and she's excited to spend the perfect Christmas with him. Dylan notices how cheerful she sounds and ruins her mood by calling her his neighbor. She clarifies that they have adjoining rooms. Frank doesn't understand why Dylan seems so happy about the delay, but for him, this is a perfect excuse to get out of reaching on Christmas. Paige decides to leave since she plans to stay at the airport so she can be the first in line when flights start taking off again. Frank wants to join her too, but Dylan knows things are too unpredictable at the time. Paige thinks he's a cynic, but he thinks there's nothing wrong with not waiting at the airport all night when they have a warm room. She reminds him that December 24th is about to be the busiest flying day, but he has no intention of sleeping on the floor in an airport. He continues to watch the news about everything closing down. At the airport, all flights are still canceled, and Paige leaves a message for Jack with an update. She's upset she can't be there to go over their wedding plan, and Maxine remembers how much work weddings and marriages take. Paige is excited about writing an article about happily ever after, which amuses Maxine. Frank doesn't know when the runways will open, but thanks Paige for saving him from another night of roll away with Maxine. When she doesn't understand, Maxine asks her to not be too worried about life after marriage. Dylan gives some tips to the bartender while listening to the latest news. Some airports are about to open early on the day before Christmas, but things are worse in Buffalo because of the storm. The news anchor doesn't think travelers can make it home in time for Christmas. As they show the passengers sleeping at the airport, he notices Paige sleeping too. On the day before Christmas, Paige learns that all flights for that day have been canceled. The train terminal is closed too, and Frank feels very frustrated about spending the whole night there for nothing. They're waiting for the shuttle when Paige thinks she doesn't care anymore and wants to accept the fact that she might not meet her in-laws till the wedding day. She finally gets a call back from Jack, who was hoping she was in another flight already. She informs him about how bad the situation is, and he offers to arrange for a car. But with the weather and due to Christmas, he doesn't think anyone will go anywhere. Paige knows nothing can be done and thinks she can try her luck the next day. Jack reminds her that his parents leave for the world cruise the morning after Christmas, and since his mom is old-fashioned, she won't approve of them getting married till she meets Paige. He suggests they can postpone the wedding from June to next spring, but that feels too long for her. Since they're getting late for a lunch with the senator, Jack asks her to find a way to get back in time. Paige starts crying at the idea of postponing her wedding as Maxine comforts her. When she wonders how she can possibly get to New York by Christmas, Dylan comes to them in an SUV, being his usual cheerful self. He's proud of the fact that while they were crashing at the airport, he managed to rent the last four-wheeler in Buffalo, and knows that some roads are open that can help them reach Manhattan by the night. Maxine is ready to hop into the car, but Paige hesitates before joining them. He teases her about feeling awkward about driving with a strange guy, but she's willing to join if they split the cost for everything. Maxine notices how anxious Paige is about meeting Jack's parents, even if she denies it. Dylan informs them that Paige writes for Radiant Bride. He wonders if Frank and Maxine felt a spark the first time they met, since Paige thinks they're soulmates. Maxine remembers how silly she thought Frank was initially, and he remembers that she drove him crazy. Dylan is happy to prove his point and keeps driving. When they stop for a meal, Paige informs Jack about reaching the next morning. She directly lies about Dylan being with them and insists she's only driving with the couple. He wants to meet them to thank them personally for dropping her off safely. She feels guilty about lying to Jack when Maxine also joins her. She asks what works in a marriage for her and Frank, and Maxine thinks aside from love, respect, and patience, a couple needs to find ways to be kind to each other. Dylan is curious about the list in Paige's bag and checks it when the women are away. Frank is also interested when they think they're reading a checklist about 75 traits for the perfect man. The more they read it, they realize it seems more like a checklist for Jack. She has checked off almost all the boxes, except one that says he must have a good sense of humor. When Dylan asks Paige if she's ready to go, she's staring at a random couple since she feels like they're soulmates. He thinks they might be on a date and is sure she'll break his heart and leave him for another guy. She is sure someone broke his heart but doesn't think he needs to ruin true love for everyone. Frank tries to play a game in the car which irritates Maxine. Dylan claims to like Paige's vision board, and she explains it's supposed to help people focus on their goals. For her, it's a bunch of pictures to represent what she wants in life. Paige already knows a vision board is not for Dylan since he clearly has relationship issues and makes jokes about things he's uncomfortable about. He thinks she probably doesn't know what funny is and asks if Jack makes her laugh. He claims to have read in an article that sense of humor is an important quality in a man. Maxine thinks Frank always makes her laugh, even when she's angry. Paige claims Jack is funny too, but since he doesn't tell any jokes, isn't sarcastic or quick-witted, they wonder how he is funny. She remembers an incident where Jack got a napkin stuck to his shoe, but no one in the car finds that funny. They try to play the game Frank was playing, especially Dylan, who wants to keep himself awake as the designated driver. He hears a sound and thinks something's wrong with the engine. But when Paige looks back, she knows it's only the sound of Frank and Maxine snoring cutely. They apologize at the same time, but Dylan lets her say her piece first. She feels bad about assuming things related to him and claims she forgets everyone is not a test subject for her stories. But she's still interested in his story and compares him to a car wreck who demands attention when people walk by. She thinks he tries to cloak everything under a weird sense of humor and feels like he's probably afraid of heartbreak. He doesn't want to discuss his story, and she respects that, but she's still very curious about why he doesn't want to go home for Christmas. She suddenly notices something on the road and shouts out, which leads to a crash. At the Tannenbaum Inn in Christmasville, Ruddy is shocked to see 3 people covered in snow, who had an accident because Paige thought she saw a bunny. The guy at the garage told Dylan that they have severely damaged the car, but he can't fix it till next morning. Ruddy thinks they're lucky since only 2 rooms are left, but Paige and Dylan clarify that they're not a couple. They decide that the women and men can sleep together to make it more comfortable. Dylan decides to take them all out for dinner to celebrate Christmas Eve, and thinks something good might come out of it. Ruddy suggests his favorite place in Santa's Village, Dasher's Diner and Pub, since their town takes Christmas very seriously. Paige loves the snow and how much everything feels like Christmas. Dylan suggests they can get some roasted chestnuts while they wait for Maxine and Frank. They decide to take a walk, but Paige is still curious about his story. He shares that he used to believe in soulmates, till his partner dumped him for his own brother. They're engaged now, which makes Paige feel very sorry for him. Maxine and Frank spot them under the mistletoe and ask them to kiss, but Dylan thinks it's a bad idea and Paige remembers she's hungry. They don't have any festive food at the pub, which reminds Maxine and Frank about their first Christmas. They didn't have a stove in their tiny apartment, so they decided to make macaroni and cheese on a hot plate and paired it with the horrible wine his father gave them for the wedding. But they still remember it as a good Christmas. Dylan shares the story about his dad always making a turkey that needed to be roasted overnight. He used to sneak down to the kitchen with his brother Bryce to get pieces of the turkey. While his dad blamed him, he remembers that Bryce always took the blame. When they ask Paige about her Christmas story, she starts with a fake one, but later confesses that she only had her mom while growing up, who did her best when money was tight. They used to watch the Christmas tree lighting at Rockefeller Center on TV, but when she got sick and passed away, Christmas didn't feel right without her. Dylan tries to assure her that she can still get the big family Christmas she hopes for. Frank thinks Christmas is where you make it, and gives an example of how they were all strangers 2 days ago. Dylan agrees with him and thinks they should all remember what they're grateful for, except the role he just had, since it's too hard. When Paige snorts with laughter, she apologizes, but Dylan thinks it's adorable. Frank doesn't remember the last time he danced with Maxine, and takes her to the dance floor. Paige is sure they're soulmates, but Dylan changes the topic. She thinks his brother might feel equally bad about the situation, even if they haven't spoken in 4 years. He's not sure what he'll do when he goes home, but Paige thinks he can try and forgive him. He doesn't want to discuss it and asks her playfully for a Christmas Eve dance, since it's apparently part of their new tradition. As Frank appreciates what a good dancer Maxine is, Dylan and Paige join them on the dance floor. As they get too close, Paige doesn't think they should be doing this, even if Dylan thinks of it as a harmless Christmas Eve dance. He knows they'll go their separate ways in the morning and might never see each other again. She agrees with that, but as they get closer, she apologizes and leaves. Maxine wants to do some shopping, so they agree to meet again at the inn. Paige thinks this Christmas Eve seems perfect, but she's sad about it since it wasn't supposed to go like this. She feels strange about spending so much time with Dylan and doesn't understand why being there on Christmas Eve still feels right to her. She insists Jack is her soulmate and they're meant to be together, but she feels like she has a lot of conflicted feelings. When he asks if Jack has ever made her laugh so hard that she snorted like he did at the bar, she has no clear answer. She hopes this Christmas will become a distant memory when she goes back home. They realize they're standing under the mistletoe again, but this time, they decide to honor the tradition. They get close and kiss under the mistletoe till carolers interrupt them. Dylan doesn't want her to be awkward about a little kiss. When Frank overhears the awkward part, Dylan makes up some story about Paige's encounter with the local. Frank is tired, so he's heading back to the room while Maxine shops. When she gets a call from Jack, Frank asks her to compliment him on his oral hygiene. Paige realizes that Frank and Dylan have gone through her bag and looked at her notebook. Dylan tries to make it sound like they glanced at it, but she understands why they were constantly asking about Jack's sense of humor. She feels hurt about them trying to make fun of her and leaves. Back in her room, she assures Jack that everything is fine. Maxine tries to sneak in quietly to not disturb Paige, but she finds out Frank is under the covers. She thinks Paige can come anytime and asks him to sort out the mix-up with the keys. He's unable to open it since the room is locked and there's no one at the front desk. He decides to crash with Maxine only and doesn't think it'll be a problem for Dylan and Paige. As they get comfortable in the bed, he remembers their hotel during their honeymoon in Mexico with the lizard in the bathtub. They remember the good times but don't recall the last time they did something special together. She wonders when they stopped giving each other a goodnight kiss, but Frank gets awkward about it and asks her to sleep. Dylan is looking for Paige in the morning but they can't find her anywhere. Reddy reveals that she slept at the office last night and hitched a ride with his uncle early morning. She hasn't left a note, but cleared half of their bill. During the ride, Paige feels conflicted about her kiss with Dylan and thinks it might have come out of a moment of weakness. Maxine apologizes to Dylan for Frank's slip of tongue that led to the fight, but Dylan knows he shouldn't have looked through her stuff. Maxine thinks Paige is making a huge mistake by starting her relationship with Jack on a lie. She overheard Paige earlier talking to herself about lying to Jack about Dylan driving them to the city. She explains that it's easier to tell your fiancé you're driving with a couple than a hot single man. Maxine and Frank think Jack is missing a lot of things and are sure she feels that spark with Dylan. He thinks she doesn't even like him and knows since she has found her soulmate, he needs to focus on going back home. Paige is excited to see Jack, but their kiss feels very awkward and he taunts her for not checking the weather conditions before going to the airport. He introduces her to his parents, who refuse to hug her and suggest she can freshen up before she meets them properly, since she looks like a mess. When Dylan drops them off, Maxine asks Frank to get the luggage so she can speak to Dylan. She gives him a present and takes out another one for Paige. She knows Paige will be at Glenrock Country Club that night for dinner if he wants an excuse to meet her. He thanks her from his heart before leaving. Outside their house, Frank is tired of their half-hearted marriage and doesn't want to walk through the door unless they can do it as a couple again. She agrees with him and they share a passionate kiss before heading inside. Paige has changed into a cute dress, but Susan taunts her about off-the-rack pieces looking just as good as proper couture these days. She's eager to try out the snacks and takes a big bite since she's hungry, but Susan and Neil seem uncomfortable with it. Susan insists that since they don't have much time to plan the wedding with her, they have decided to host it at Senator Wells' house in the Hamptons. Paige looks to Jack for support but makes a polite comment about having a wedding in the backyard. Jack explains that his dad owes the senator a favor, because of which they need to do it. Paige nervously jokes about things working out for them and snorts. Jack reminds her to get ready soon for dinner and asks her not to challenge his parents about everything. She still thinks they should have some say in their own weddings, but Jack thinks such events are more social and asks her to trust him. He also wonders about her snort earlier and thinks it's strange. When he leaves, she takes out the list from her bag and wonders something. Dylan unwraps Maxine's gift and finds a photo of himself with Paige. His mother meets him warmly and asks him to wait there for his father. His ex, Cynthia, seems shocked to see him, but Bryce also comes out then, who seems even more shocked. Dylan congratulates them warmly about their wedding next week and asks for Bryce's help with the bags. Bryce offers to let Dylan hit him anywhere he wants so he feels better, but Dylan knows that he has finally forgiven him and feels like Cynthia and Bryce are made for each other. They hug and start to take out the bags, when Bryce notices Paige's vision board. Paige comments on how lovely the club is, but Susan shocks her again since she has already booked them to cater the wedding. She has also spoken to a friend to make her wedding dress. She agrees that Paige can choose the dress, but wants her to find something less busty, which offends her. Paige notices how warm the rolls are, and remembers they're much fresher than what Dylan had. When Jack wonders who Dylan is, she explains that he was part of the ride, but she still describes him as an old man with fake teeth. Dylan has reached the club to drop off the vision board and smiles at her when he explains that it helps a person focus on what they're looking for. Paige notices the picture of them stuck on her vision board. Jack asks if she has something to say, and she takes off her wedding ring. She knows she was trying to chase the perfect guy, which led her to lose sight of her own happily ever after. She asks Dylan if he knows of a proper dinner place around there, and he's happy to help for a kiss. After the kiss, he wonders if she thinks they're soulmates, but she doesn't know and wants to take a chance with him. They kiss again and turn up at his place, where he introduces her to his mother, who greets her very warmly. When she notices the decorations and the beautiful Christmas tree, she knows this is what she always wanted for Christmas.